When working with files in Git, it's important to know the different status the file can have and the status of the changes you make to code, to the application code. There are 3 stages such a local change in the code goes through. If I create a new file or make changes in an existing file, then this change is going to be in my working directory. And then I can later add those changes to a staging area, and everything from the staging area can be committed to my local repository. So now what we can do is actually add some file. So I'm going to create a README file. This is the standard. And let's just write, this is my new project. Doesn't really matter. And now what I can do is I can do git status, and this will tell me the status of my local Git repository. And in status, there's a bunch of information. It will tell me which branch I'm on, if I have any local changes that I should commit and add to the remote repository, and so on, right? Now you may be thinking, why do I need to know what changes I have locally? I just made a change so I would remember. But usually what happens is, if you're working on a task for a long time, for example, for a couple of days, you come to work the next day, you probably want to be up to date to what is the state of your local repository now, and it could be a bunch of files that you have changed. So you can see the status of that change using this command. And here you see the file that we created is under untracked files, and we have a suggestion from Git that we should add the file. So what does it mean? What this means is that this change will be promoted to a staging area with git add. So basically Git knows that there is a change, but it doesn't consider it as something that will be merged or pushed back to the remote repository. So it's like we are just testing things out, and we're not sure if this will end up in the remote repository. Now, if at some point I think I would like to commit that change at the end, I can move my changes to the staging area. Or in other words, I can promote it to staging area closer to being the end result. And I can do that using git add. I can either take the file and add it directly. If I have 50 files, for example, I don't want to copy each one of them, I can just do dot, which means add every single file change that I have. Now, again, if you're working on some task locally and doing a bunch of different changes, you may not want to commit all of those to the repository, so you can decide to add just 10 files and leave the other 10 untracked, so to say, right? So in this case, we're just gonna add the one file. And now if I do get status, here you see it has become green, first of all. It also says new file, so now Git started tracking it, so it knows it is a new file. And instead of untracked files, now we have changes to be committed section. So now what this means is that this file is ready to be committed and then pushed to the remote repository. If I make another change to the README, and do git status again, here you see I have one tracked file that is ready to be committed, and I have another one that is untracked. And the best use case or usage for that is, again, if I'm working on something complex and complicated, I have made maybe 50 different changes, and I'm sure that 30 of those changes will for sure end up in the repository, but I'm not sure about the 20 other changes. I have to test them, and I have to try out if they're really the correct changes, so I can kind of separate those two sets of changes in my local repository. So for example, I'm not sure about this second change here in README. I just want this one to be pushed in the repository. And I'm going to continue working around and playing around with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do git commit. And this will take all the files that are in this section, changes to be committed, not here will ignore these ones. It will just take this and allow me to add some description to what I did. I can say edit readme file because this is what I did. And if I close my Vim editor, you see a bunch of things because I haven't configured this stuff. But what's important is here you see that one file changed and one insertion. So now if I do git status, let's actually clear this up and do git status again. And here you see that green line is gone because I have committed it. So I have something that I can push now to the remote repository. Now if I do git log, this is what I told you about, the history of the changes in Git. And I can see that history using git log. And obviously this is showing me local history because this change is not in the remote repository yet. This doesn't know about the change, right? So this is just showing me the local repository history. So now I can take and push what I have in the local repository to remote. And I can do that using git push. And again, you see some feedback output basically. And if I go and refresh, you see I have one file, I have different project view, and I have one file that I have edited with the text. Now others can also clone the repo and start working on it, adding files and some code and working on it.